Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. Tonight we have another Dump the Corruption show. And our topic is prioritizing presidential candidates. I expect that Dee Piers, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends, will be on with us in just a minute or two. But for now, I am here by myself. And we'll start off the show. So, okay. First, we're going to prioritize candidates from a progressive point of view. And we're going to consider 5 candidates. At least we're going to mention 5 candidates. We may give short shrift to some, but the 5 candidates are Joe Biden, Donald Trump, also Marianne Williamson, Cornel West, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So those are the 5 that we're going to be considering. I'm going to start by listing some issues. It's my list of issues, so it may not correspond entirely with a list of issues that are important, for the candidates, because not only am I doing this from a progressive point of view, but I'm also doing it from my point of view. So I'm going to be putting down the issues that are very important to me in terms of evaluating candidates. So here goes with my list of issues. First one is empowering democracy by driving big money out of politics. Dump the corruption, restore freedom of speech, press, and assembly, end censorship in public utilities, such as internet platforms, which I believe ought to be classified as public utilities. So, why do I list this particular issue first? The reason why is because, especially when it comes to driving big money out of politics, but not even especially. In other words, from the dump the corruption standpoint, driving big money out of politics is essential, but restoring freedom of speech, press, and assembly is also essential. And ending censorship in public utilities is also essential to empower democracy here in the United States. But the first big one is to get the big money out of politics. We've seen the big money spread around in increasingly large amounts in election after election, after election. It is the big factor in undermining democracy here in the United States, and it continues to do so in every election year. But certainly, there may be some individual elections in which the message of financial underdogs gets through, but by and large, in 94 or 95% of the cases, the person with the financial advantage wins the election. And here is Dee Piers, the host
Hello, everyone.
of
Happy
The
to be
World
here.
with Dee and Friends. And
I
hello,
said
Dee.
happy. Happy to be here. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing fine. I'm getting to the nitty gritty in this show.
Okay, I got here on time.
Right. So, uh, I've been going through some issues that I think are important in evaluating candidates. The first issue was, of course, empowering democracy by driving big money out of politics, but dump the corruption, that is, but also restoring freedom of speech, press, and assembly. Very, very important. And ending censorship in public utilities, such as the internet platforms. That's become an increasingly important issue as we see how the internet shapes opinion and how the companies that have the platforms are shaping opinions through their suppression of those opinions they believe should not be featured. So we have this.
Yes, hello, Kay. Kay's here.
Okay, so that's the first issue. Okay's here. Hi, Kay Ryan. How you doing? Okay, so the first issue is empowering democracy by driving big money out of politics. The dump the corruption issue, and that's the first issue because uh, if we don't do that, we aren't going to be able to meet satisfactorily most of the other issues that we are going to mention. For example, the very next issue, which in itself is, of course, the most important issue, but okay, to dump the corruption issue is only more important because we can't get at this second issue until we satisfactorily resolve the first issue. So, the second issue is avoiding the risk of nuclear war presented by the conflict in Ukraine and by the Cold War, okay, in Asia, which is beginning. Cold War is beginning to get colder and colder, or from another point of view, it's beginning to get hotter and hotter in the sense that the risk of nuclear war is becoming more serious. Uh, but the point is, we have the risk of nuclear war in those two theaters, and we have that, as I've said here often on my shows, for the first time since the middle 1980s. That's nearly 40 years. And the Biden administration has been instrumental in making this risk a serious risk once again for the first time, okay, in 40 years. Now, Trump was beginning to get there with his foreign policy with respect to Asia, okay, with respect to China, but he didn't go nearly as far as the Biden administration has done. And of course, Trump was nowhere near conflict, okay, in Ukraine, conflict, okay, with Russia, his having a friendly relationship with Putin. So we have to evaluate our candidates based on uh, whether we think they will be able to avoid the risk, okay, of nuclear war or tamp down that risk so it's not a serious risk, okay, anymore. And that has to be a very, very important criteria, okay, for evaluating them. Because if we get a nuclear war, then none of us are going to survive. Because what the nuclear war doesn't finish, the climate emergency will. Because the climate emergency is built into our futures right now. And unless we can manage, okay, the climate emergency, and it is also going to end many species now on the face of the earth, including the human species. So I, in a way, got to the climate emergency too fast, because when we think about the risk of a nuclear war in itself, that brings up the issue of us avoiding the existential threat of a Trump versus Biden choice, or similar choices, such as one between, let's say, Ron DeSantis versus Gavin Newsom, who I like to refer to as Bobo Newsom. Anyway, whether I want to call them names or not, I think basically the DeSantis versus Newsom choice is very similar to the Trump versus Biden choice, because I think that both of these people would exacerbate the Cold War, okay, in Asia, as Trump and Biden would also. As you know, okay, I believe that Ukraine war will be done now within months, 4 or 5 months or something like that. So that war will not then be an existential threat anymore. But the Cold War, okay, in Asia, pursued by both Trump and Biden, which is very likely if they're elected, and also DeSantis, okay, and Newsom if they're elected, or if some of the other Republican clowns take the place of Trump, and Newsom gets a Democratic nomination, which is becoming, I would say, increasingly likely at this point, actually. I think that it's a pretty good chance he's going to continue the Cold War with China, uh, uh, should Newsom win. And I think DeSantis was also on the same road as Trump, okay, with respect to that. So the issue of avoiding the existential threat, okay, is very important. But implicitly in this existential threat of a Trump versus Biden choice, that also immediately excludes from the evaluation either Trump, okay, or Biden, both of them. There's no need for a detailed evaluation of either of them, simply because they're now risking our very lives by risking, okay, a nuclear war, and we cannot tolerate that from presidential candidates, okay, anymore. That has to be a no-no from our points of view. Nothing else they do can make up for the fact that they're exposing us all to nuclear destruction. So that's what I think, and that's how I evaluate both Trump and Biden. So I'm throwing them out at this point. So now we get to our other three candidates. So I want to introduce some other criteria for that. Okay. While still retaining the criteria of dumping the corruption and avoiding the risk, okay, of nuclear war. So here comes another criteria for evaluation, and I'm not trying to get to the relative importance of these at this point, okay, because I don't want to get into anything too complex here. All the criteria I'm going to mention, okay, are important, and for one or another of us may exclude a particular candidate. Anyway, the next criteria is ending these extremists on the Supreme Court. I'm not calling for the end of the Supreme Court, but I'm just saying this, conservative 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. I shouldn't even call them conservative. They're not conservative. They're extremists. They seem bent on turning the law in this country back to the 19th century. I think that's extremist. I think any sane person thinks that's extremist. I don't think these 6 justices are sane, with the possible exception of John Roberts. I think the others are just plain nuts. If you consider the trends in the world at large, not just here in the United States, but in the wide world, for people to want to turn the clock back to 19th century law here in the United States is freaking ridiculous. Next, then, is ending the climate emergency. Why did I mention the extremist Supreme Court first? Because I believe the extremist Supreme Court, through its rulings, is going to make it impossible to meet the climate emergency, because they will declare unconstitutional many climate initiatives that might be pursued by a new president or a new Congress. Okay. So I think the first order of business has to be to pass laws with the exceptions clause of Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution to prevent the extremist Supreme Court from reviewing new legislation. Secondly, I think candidates have to be for packing the Supreme Court so these justices no longer have a majority, so that new, saner justices get appointed to the Supreme Court. I myself favor 6 new justices for the Supreme Court to give the sane people a 9-6 majority over the insane people. So the next issue after that is ending the climate emergency. In itself, if we're looking longer term, that is the most serious, of the emergencies. But we can't get to grapple with that until we go through the issues of the existential choice and dump the corruption and ending the extremist Supreme Court. Then there's the issue of fixing the American healthcare system. It's often seen as the Medicare for All issue, but it could also be considered a national health system issue as well. There are different ways to fix the American healthcare system, but fixed it must be, because it is a horror for too many people. Hundreds of thousands of people going bankrupt because of the operation of this particular system. There are divorces caused by the impact of this particular system. There are fatalities caused. The estimates run in the range of 70,000 per year, but I'm sure it's much higher than that. It was 70,000 a year before the COVID emergency. It's got to be higher now. Next, fixing the electoral system so every adult has an unconstrained right to vote. We can get there if the dump the corruption issue is handled appropriately. Next is gender equality and reproductive choice. That is essential. The Supreme Court took that away. We have to get that back in the very, very short run. It is uncompromisable. That's why we have to do some of these other things quick. Then, in my view, using the right economic paradigm for fiscal and monetary policy, is also essential. We can't operate with neoliberal and austerity paradigms. We have to adhere to economics for the public purpose. For me, that means candidates have to be evaluated by whether they accept the economic paradigm of modern money theory. I think that is very of the first importance if we're going to have fiscal and monetary policies here domestically in the United States that are going to deliver prosperity and greater equality for people. And there's the criterion, also very, very important. All these top criterions are huge priorities and very basic criteria of evaluation for the candidates that we must consider. Maybe I should go back and talk a little more about fixing the electoral system so every adult has an unconstrained right. But to vote, well, let me go further. I think I may handle one of the implications of that a little later. So, next criteria then is changing U.S. foreign policy to one that recognizes the legitimacy of a multipolar world requiring collaboration with other great powers and bringing economic and social justice to developing nations, and to ethnic groups. Specifically, I had in mind here non-state types, of ethnic groups who don't have, their nationhood yet. I'll get more explicit about that at some later time. But I think that a president who doesn't recognize, the legitimacy of a multipolar world at this point is denying reality. We can't have a president like that anymore. The two major candidates, Biden and Trump, both do that. Biden to a greater extent than Trump, I believe. But they both violate that particular criterion, which is one reason why I already excluded them. Next is ending domestic poverty by constructing a socially inclusive socioeconomic safety net characterized by a federal job guarantee, a basic income, free education at every level of schooling, and elimination of student debt. Next, yes, I did handle this here. Justice for non-state ethnic groups wanting self-determination. Here, of course, I'm thinking of the Kurds. Here, of course, I am thinking, of the Palestinians. They must have their right to self-determination recognized and respected by the international community. I know that's going to be very difficult, but I think we should have a commitment from our major candidates to work for self-determination for non-state ethnic groups who want to have self-determination. And of course, most prominent among these is the Palestinians and the Kurds. Next criterion for evaluating candidates: justice for indigenous people. Now, these issues of justice for non-state ethnic groups wanting self-determination, justice, for indigenous people, may not seem as urgent to most of ourselves as the issue is to these people. and that is natural. And I think that is the way that it's going to be. But we have to recognize at least that they deserve justice, and we have to work towards giving them justice, even if a lot of the other criteria are more urgent for most of us than these criteria are. We need justice also LGBTQIA plus groups seeking equality within our society. That's okay, a pretty urgent need. Uh, uh, Once again, we see a situation where that kind of need is not as important to most of the population as some of the other criteria um, um, that I mentioned. But these are still important criteria that we need to use to evaluate our candidates. Now, of course, I may have missed some important criteria here, but uh, okay, if you who are watching this would offer some other criteria for me, I'd be happy to entertain those. But now I want to turn to the remaining three candidates. First, of course, okay, is Marianne Williamson. Do we need to apply the various criteria to her? I would say right now, no, we don't, even though her positions fulfill most of these criteria. But why wouldn't we apply the evaluation criteria to her? For the simple reason that she is still part of the Democratic primary. And just as the primary was being rigged against Bobby Kennedy, that same primary is being rigged against her. But she doesn't have the sense, okay, to go independent. She has no chance in that primary. If she's a serious presidential candidate, she needs to go independent, the way Cornell, okay, and Bobby Kennedy are doing. So I have to say that by staying inside, okay, of the Democratic Party, she has given up her chance to win. So even though many aspects of her platform, okay, are very attractive, including some of her foreign policy aspects, uh, okay, I don't think that she's a reasonable sort of alternative, okay, at this point, because her candidacy is being wasted by being a part of the primary being rigged by the DNC. So this now leaves us, okay, with two candidates, Cornel West and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let us recognize, okay, to begin with, that barring some sort, okay, of miracle, these candidates won't have a realistic chance, okay, at the presidency if the dump the corruption movement is unsuccessful. And if by some miracle they were to get through the gauntlet of money bombs that would be thrown at them, they wouldn't be able to do very much anyway, because both the South, the House, and the Senate, and in addition, the Supreme Court, would be hostile to what they wanted, to do. They might be able to do some good in terms of regulations that they'd be able to get through. They might be able to do some good in driving some of the neoliberals out of the federal government. But basically, the level of effectiveness we need from a president now, beginning in 2025, due to the immediacy of the risks of nuclear war and climate change and damage to democracy, they won't be able to do much in time. I want to point out how important the time factor is here. Some people are these days enjoying supporting the Green Party because it has good people. It has a good platform. Okay. I know Cornel West has stepped out, is running as an independent. There's talk that Jill Stein will run instead. I personally think that Jill Stein is a good person. She's a good candidate. I think the Green Party has good people. I think they have people who can be the president of the United States and who would do a good job if they had a Congress supporting them. But first of all, they themselves have almost no chance. I think they know it. I think at this point they're focused on becoming one of the major parties, on becoming a third party. I have to say, I don't think we have time for that. Well, in one context, we may have time for it. But what I'm saying is, if Dump the Corruption is unsuccessful, I don't think we have time to make the Green Party a major party through 2 or 3 election cycles. We don't have that time to survive. We are in an urgent survival situation. Okay, it's an emergency now. We can't afford 2 or 3 or 4 cycles to make the Green Party a third party that could possibly sweep elections. It's not going to happen in less time than that. And we lose the whole ball game if we take that much time. So those who are following the Green Party, endorsing the Green Party, working hard for the Green Party in hopes that they can build the Green Party into a major party, I think they have to realistically assess that won't be happening for 2 or 3 or 4 election cycles, and that we don't have the time for that. So I don't think their strategy is a realistic strategy, not from my point of view. I'm sorry to have to say so. Okay. But I have to say so. So what I'm saying is, I think that for the Green Party, for Cornel West, and very likely also for Bobby Kennedy too, without a successful Dump the Corruption campaign, changing the Congress, okay, and giving either Bobby Kennedy or Cornel West the chance to become the president of the United States, they won't become the president of the United States, and neither will the Green Party candidate, whoever ends up as being, okay, the Green Party candidate. None of the three of them will succeed in 2024, and we need the big change in 2024, or we are not going to make it. That's my judgment. So dump the corruption has to be successful. We have to restore freedom of speech, press, and assembly. We have to end censorship in our public utilities like the internet platforms. So I have to assume when I'm evaluating these candidates, I have to assume that in the election of 2024, we will be operating in the context where the Dump the Corruption movement has been successful, and where the public in the elections of 2024, where the public is ready to throw out every candidate or challenger who does not meet the test that is inherent in the rule for voting that I have offered you many times now. Just to refresh your memory, I will do the rule one more time. It will only take a moment. It usually only takes a moment. And so here it is. Vote against every candidate except those who won't take money from wealthy corporations, individuals, PACs, or party committees, and who repudiate all super PAC support. If people are ready to vote that way in 2024, then Trump and Biden will be out. Our existential crisis will be over. And there can be a reasonable contest between the two remaining candidates that I'm evaluating tonight, specifically Cornel West and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. On the other hand, if the Dump the Corruption, if that movement is not there by election time of 2024, we will be condemned to a number of election cycles in order to get a government that will take either the nuclear war crisis seriously or the climate emergency seriously or the democracy crisis seriously in this country. All three of these crises will not be taken seriously if Biden or Trump should win, or Newsom or Trump should win, or Newsom or DeSantis should win, and we're therefore condemned to wait for the change for 2, 3, or 4 election cycles. Once again, we do not have the time for that. So now let's get to the evaluation of Robert F. Kennedy and Cornel West in the context that I hope will exist in the election of 2024, that the public is ready to follow the rule and destroy the system we have now by completely changing the Congress and seeing to it that only candidates taking small dollar donations will be elected to the presidency. So now I want to turn to the platform of Cornel West. I should say, before I go on to the platform of Cornel West, I think I'd like to give Dee a chance to weigh in here. Okay. Uh, from your point of view, is there anything wrong with my argument so far?
No, see anything wrong with it. I think this is an important moment in history. I think because we're seeing more people want to break away from the two-party system. So it's imperative to try to get behind somebody that's not in the duopoly.
Right. But of course, unless there's dumped the corruption, okay, that's in the background. The people who want to get away from the duopoly, who are running, will be flooded with hostile ads, with all manner of money,
Mm-hmm.
and they won't have the opportunity to raise enough money to contest the $1.5 billion that will be raised by Trump and Biden. And of course, unless dump the corruption case in effect, then the insurgent small dollar candidates for Congress and for the Senate can't possibly win in any numbers to make a difference. Some of them may slip through, but then
Like
they'll
you
be.
said, dump the corruption's important, and it's important to let the campaigns know about it.
It's important the campaigns know about it. It's important the campaigns run on it.
Yeah, it would be nice for them to run on it, and also for people to know about it. And we have to be the ones to be sharing information about these candidates and really letting people know who they are, not fall into the trap of the whole negativity thing.
Yes. Yes, we
Keep
have to
telling
do
people
that.
the positives of the candidates, of these, independent candidates.
Right. But all the candidates have to emphasize that they are inherently better than the establishment candidates because they're not going to be representing the donor class. They
Exactly.
will
That's
be
why there's no difference
representing
between
the
the
donors.
right. That's why there's no difference. That's why we don't have health care for everybody. And that's why every single issue, oil comes back to the money.
And that's why we have the risk of nuclear war right now. I mean,
Exactly.
no Americans in any sizable number wanted the horrible foreign policy the Biden administration has been following in Europe.
No.
Nobody wanted the coup in Ukraine that occurred under the Obama administration. Nobody wanted the turn towards the Pacific, which the United States is undertaking now, bringing it into a possible war with China. There are very few Americans who want that. The people who want it are crazy elites with dreams of running the world. But we ordinary Americans do not want that. The
No,
reason
they
why
don't. And
we have
people
those
are seeing
policies is because we no longer have a democracy.
exactly. And people have woken up to a lot of this World Economic Forum BS.
Yes, I think so. So let's go on to the platforms of Cornel West and then Bobby Kennedy and talk about their campaigns and their central messages. So I'm going to share now the policy platform page from Cornel West's website to look at. This is his platform that he's running on. He calls it policy pillars for movement rooted in truth, justice, okay, and love. Okay. The first section, okay, is economic justice. His aims: to abolish poverty, abolish homelessness, establish federal public banking institutions to fund public infrastructure and green reconstruction, establish a federal universal basic income commission, I guess to consider the legislation of a universal basic income, a wealth tax on all billionaire holdings and transactions. I have to say, so far I'm for every one of these things, with the possible exception of a universal basic income commission, because I'm not sure we need such a commission. Okay, I think we could simply legislate, a basic income now, along with the federal job guarantee, and we'll get to the job guarantee in just a minute in its platform. So I don't think we need to have a commission to study the problem. I think it's easy to develop good legislation for this. There's been a lot of research done on this. The only thing I would say is that a basic income alone will not be good. It will be inflationary. But a basic income with the job guarantee would be good. Anyway, to go on. A wealth tax on billionaire holdings and transactions. Yes, we need to do that. Not because we need the revenue from the wealthy, because we don't, but because we need to disempower them politically, and we need to have very taxes on them to take away the money they use to influence campaigns. I'm really upfront about that. I don't mince words about that. The influence they have on politics is undermining our democracy. It has to stop. We need heavy wealth taxes on them. I don't know that Cornell agrees with this. I have a feeling he's wanting the wealth tax for funding things because he doesn't understand we don't need the wealth tax for funding things. Or he doesn't want to explain that to the people if he does understand it. End all tax loopholes for the oligarchy. Well, it's not the easiest thing in the world to define what a tax loophole is, but I generally agree with the idea, while recognizing it may be hard in some instances to implement. A national $27 minimum wage with special considerations for specific geographies, where $27 an hour would not be a family-sustaining wage. Now, I completely agree with this. As far as I know, he's the first one to advance this particular proposal. I think it's a very good proposal. In my own thinking, I hadn't been as bold as this, as what I'm seeing here. I was thinking in terms of maybe a $22 an hour minimum wage for the lowest cost area of the United States, with cost adjustments going upward using the CPI for all the other areas of the United States. That would probably produce a similar result to what Cornell is talking about here, but I'm quite happy to see him propose this. I really like it. Mandatory minimum of 6 months of fully paid parental leave. I think that is excellent. I might propose a little more, but I just think that's a wonderful proposal. People need that. I have no problem with the affordability of this, because if we subsidize that program in a proper way, it will be possible to extend such leave, and families need it. Ensuring family sustaining and living wages for all disability benefits. I certainly agree with that. National Jobs Program to assure full employment to every person. In my estimation, that's a federal job guarantee. And Cornell is reflecting the views of Darrick Hamilton and Sandy Darity, in that, which are views very close, to MMT views. But I think Cornell is more likely to be closer to Darrick Hamilton, whom he likely met during the Bernie Sanders campaign and spoke to. Increase federal support for businesses established as worker-owned cooperatives and other alternative worker models. Right to qualify. I love that, by the way. Right to qualify for affordable housing by eliminating coverage gaps. End to Wall Street mass of real estate holdings. Yes, the holdings by Wall Street of housing all across the United States. High percentage of housing driving up the price of homes, which in turn drives up the price of rent. Yes, we must have an end to that. And to Wall Street mass real estate holdings and the marketization of human rights. That's what it's been, a marketization of human rights. He wants to break up the monopolies, including big tech. So do I. He wants to ban corporate stock buybacks. So do I. He wants to end the use of credit scores for any decisions associated with finance, housing, or employment. I think if he wants to end the use of credit scores for those decisions, he has to be supporting also small community banks that people can go to, where people get to know the bankers get to know the people, where the bankers are in a position to assess the credit risk represented by the people, so that you don't need these credit scores. I mean, the credit scores are tools for the big commercial banks to bureaucratize the decisions whether or not to make a loan. That's basically what the credit scores are for. If we get rid of the big banks and we go back to community banking, we won't need those credit scores. So I am in support of that, with some other accompanying legislation. Ban stock trading for government officials, way overdue, especially for the Congress, but for the executive branch too, and certainly for the Supreme Court. God knows what the freaking Supreme Court is doing in this area, because it ain't public. Worker justice. Establish a workers' bill of rights that includes the end of right-to-work states, greater protections for workers who attempt to unionize, requirement for all nonprofit organizations to allow for the unionization of workers in collective bargaining. You bet. Kaiser Permanente. 1 year limit on contract. On actually negotiating a contract. If the contract is not completed in 1 year, the demands of the workers will be immediately codified. Well, I can see that going bad, because, of course, what's the incentive for worker demands? To be practical in that kind of situation. if the workers think they're going to get exactly what they're demanding anyway, okay, if they wait out a year, then there's space, okay, for the abuse of that. I do agree with 1 year limit, okay, on the negotiations of contracts, but I think there has to be some kind, okay, of arbitration process, which is carefully monitored by the Department of Labor to ensure that the arbitrators are neutral between the employers, okay, and the employees. I might want something like, okay, put an overall 1 year limit, but starting at 6 months, the arbitrator is brought in to talk to the management, okay, and the workers, and to hear the case while the union continues to strike and the management continues to bargain, okay, with the union. But everybody knows the arbitration has started and they're fully familiar with the case, and they know that they have 6 months to make an agreement or the arbitrator will make it for them. I think that's what I would favor instead of that. But 33% minimum worker representation for all boards, okay, of directors. I might set that a little higher, maybe 45%. Transform paid family leave to mandate a minimum of 6 months fully paid time off. End all pay discrepancies based on race, gender identity, disability status, etc. Establish a federal commission to institute a 4-day work week. I agree with that. Review all U.S. trade agreements and cancel any provisions that exploit workers domestically and internationally. I certainly agree with that. National free pre-K child care. I mean, look, I love these planks. These are great planks. This is what people need. Going forward, environmental justice. Moving beyond the Green New Deal to a global reconstruction initiative. Constitutional right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. Nationalize the fossil fuel industry. That constitutional right is going to take at least 7 years to pass, but that's all right. We can start it. It can be started. In fact, it can be put into law, okay, to begin with, and with the use of Article 3, Section 2 to prevent the Supreme Court from reviewing this provision for clean air, clean water, okay, and a healthy environment, that can be done first while simultaneously the process to make it a constitutional amendment goes forward. Nationalize the fossil fuel industry. I couldn't agree more. If we nationalize them, we'll be able to phase them out without any trouble, without constant lawsuits or any crap like that. Just nationalize them. The point is, there has to be an orderly end to the fossil fuel industry. The companies won't do it themselves, so the nation has to do it. And the only way we can do it is by owning the fossil fuel industry. So the nation makes the decisions. Acknowledge and declare a climate emergency. Absolutely, Cornell, absolutely. Immediate cessation of oil and gas leasing projects on federal lands and waters. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Federal moratorium on fracking, carbon capture, and direct air capture technologies, geoengineering, and other false climate solutions. I have to think about that some more. I want to do it on fracking. I know something about the carbon capture and direct air capture technologies, okay, and geoengineering. I'm not really up on it though. I know something about it. I've been skeptical about it, but before I agreed completely with this particular subplank, uh, I would want to know more about it. Climate reparations and contribute fair share to the global loss. Okay, and damage fund, yes. Justice for Cancer Alley and other energy and economic sacrifice Jones, yes. Cancel the Willow Project, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and all other harmful and unnecessary projects harming people and planet. Establish a national risk bond program for the fossil fuel and mining industries and associated infrastructure. Codify free, prior, and informed consent, okay, for indigenous people. Absolutely yes. End water privatization and establish a commission to address and solve the drinking water crises across the nation. Rescind the toxic provisions of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Yes, absolutely. I mean, my level of agreement with the first three of these areas of justice. I mean, it's got to be like 96 or 97%. I mean, I agree on almost everything. Now we get to health justice. Go beyond Medicare for all towards true health justice. Habeas corpus health care. I'm not sure what habeas corpus health care is, but I'm sure he can clarify that. Free health care for any and all residents of the United States. Um, Codify abortion rights as a constitutional mandate. Yes, but first, codify abortion rights into law while you're working on a constitutional amendment, because you don't get a constitutional amendment through in less than 7 years, I think. So, codify abortion rights in law first and put an Article 3, Section 2 provision in it so the Supreme Court cannot judicially review the grant of abortion rights. Play rough. It shall be this way and no other way. Remove transgender exclusions, but limitations from all healthcare policies, yes. Nationalize the healthcare industry, including the pharmaceutical industry. I don't know if I'm there yet with that. Okay, but I might be close. I might be close. He certainly wouldn't lose my vote over that particular plank. And I completely agree concerning the pharmaceutical industry. Yes, nationalize the pharmaceutical industry. Whether you nationalize the doctors so they all work for National Health Service, okay, I don't know. Not sure about that. End medical apartheid and protect increased rights for people, okay, with disabilities. Yes. End the war on drugs and associated collateral damage on families and communities. Yes. Establish a COVID-19 commission to deliver justice for populations disproportionately impacted by the pandemic? Yes. Convene a federal panel of scientists and experts to study the safety and utilization of vaccines for infectious diseases? Absolutely. And make sure that none of the scientists and experts are beholden to the pharmaceutical companies. Make sure the right people are appointed to this panel so we get objective evaluations from them. Establish a health bill of rights for disabled people to address and dismantle specific healthcare challenges they face. Absolutely. Racial justice, a reparations commission for a national program to address the unpaid debt to Black residents of the United States. Absolutely. End mass incarceration and codify voting rights for all incarcerated people, and immediately reinstate voting rights for all returning citizens. Yes. Okay. Address the disproportionate mortality rate for Black pregnancies. Yes. Require public review commissions for every police force in the nation. Reinstate Section 4B and Section 5 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Yes. Just pass it again and put in the exception that the Supreme Court is not allowed to review it. That'll end that crap. Establish a land back commission to explore. Now, remember, all these things, all these things he's putting forward. Okay, which you would say, I want to vote for him because of these things. All these things will never pass without dump the corruption. None of them will pass. Has a great platform. Might get him 10 or 15% of the vote, or 5% of the vote, which would be a big step for the Green Party. Well, he's not with the Green Party anymore, but a big step for whatever ticket he's putting together here, whatever institution he may be putting together here. It would be great for that. But we need more for the election of 2024. We need a Congress that will take this platform and that will consider it and will consider whether the people support it. And if the people support it, will back each of the things Cornell wants to do on this platform. Establish a land back commission to explore and address brutal land theft from, attempted genocide of, and broken treaties with indigenous peoples, of course. Full use of federal forces to investigate and end the epidemic of missing and murdered indigenous women. Yes, Brother Cornell, yes. Codify the Justice for Black Farmers Act for immediate execution. Yes. Getting to transformative justice now. Protect free speech. Enforce whistleblower protections. And stop the prosecution of those who expose government corruption. Shut down Cop City and plans for similar facilities across the nation. Yes, yes. End mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex. Yes, again. Redistribute police funding to unarmed community-led forces. Yes. Also eliminate crowded prison facilities by developing alternatives to incarceration. Yes. Far too many people are in prison. We know that we passed through a time where many more people were sent to prison and many more lives were destroyed than deserved to be sent to prison or destroyed. Prisoner Bill of Rights that includes a right to humane treatment and humane living conditions for all correctional facilities. Also abolish the use of solitary confinement. Investigate, I'm for that. Investigate and end sentencing disparities based on race, ethnicity, and class. Ban the death penalty, life without the possibility of parole, three strikes laws, also mandatory minimums, and sentence enhancement politics. And for that, restore voting rights for people with criminal records, including those who are currently incarcerated. Confiscate all military equipment from civilian police forces. End and prohibit all police training programs by military forces, including but not limited to the Israel Defense Forces. God, yes. God, yes. Our police should not be a military force. That's for banana republics. It isn't for what's supposed to be the world's leading democracy. That's a measure of our progress towards fascism here in the United States. The fact that these police forces are militarized. Thank you, Bill Clinton, who started it all. Shit. Education justice. Center public schools and reduce the need for charter schools. I'd probably end charter schools. Just end them. End the nexus of quality education and tax base. There is no reason why a public school in Beverly Hills should be better than a public school in Lowndes County, Alabama. Okay, I think there's no reason, but there are factors why that's going to be the case. You would have to do extraordinary things to get high quality teachers to go live in Lowndes County, Alabama. That's going to be hard to do. You're going to have to pay, offer pay incentives of various kinds. Going to have to offer that for inner city schools, and more than pay incentives, special programs. Well, you know, there are going to be all sorts of problems. I'm not saying this should not be attempted. This is a very important effort that should be attempted. Okay. And we need to keep on trying to get this equality created. We need to accept it as an ideal that we always want, to maximize. But we also have to recognize that it's inherently very hard to get this kind of equalization. But I'm for trying. So I agree with the effort. Free tuition for all state and community colleges, yes. A minimum wage of $80,000 for all U.S. public school teachers, K through 12, yes. Dismantle the school to prison pipeline. I got to say there's no reason why public school teachers in Finland should be making so much more than public school teachers here in the United States. This shouldn't happen. The federal government should ensure that this does not happen.
Healthcare is better too.
Yes. Probably the standard of Finland should be adopted for wages for public school teachers here in the United States from K through 12. Dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline by removing police and so-called resource officers from all public schools. Cancel all student loan debt. Absolutely. Reinstate the fair use of race, ethnicity, and class as a factor for admission to secondary schools and universities. Yes, we still need that. We still need it. Abolish state laws that limit or remove the full and accurate study of U.S. History, of course. Increase federal funding for historic black colleges and universities and tribal colleges and universities. Yes, I agree with that too. LGBTQIA plus justice and the unwarranted, necessary, and dangerous assaults on transgender people. Gender affirming standards of care for trans people in public life and institutions. Codify an equal rights amendment for LGBTQIA plus U.S. residents. National ban on any and all don't say gay laws and all other anti-LGBTQIA plus laws. Yep, I'm for all of that. Gun violence justice, end the gun violence epidemic. National Gun Registry database for all civilians, similar to the Resource Conservation Recovery Act database for hazardous materials. Establish similar requirements for driver's licenses to gun ownership. Drastically limit the number of sales at gun shows. National red flag law that expedites the process of gun confiscation from individuals who pose a danger to themselves and communities. I'm all for that. I might go a little farther by passing a law that mimics the law that was passed by Australia that ended the gun epidemic there. In many ways, the Australians are very much like us, culturally speaking. They're also highly individualistic. Their law has worked very, very well, their gun control law. We should consider just passing it here. Immigration justice, massive investment in transforming immigration policies to create a broad legal pathway for residency that centers compassion, also morality, dignity, and ethics. Okay, by the way, going through the immigration courts to get people here on a legal basis, that has to happen really, really quickly. I'll go through the rest of these bullet points to see how quickly this would happen under him. End crimes against humanity for migrants and their families. No separation of families, no children in cages. Nobody in cages. Cut red tape that allows, that actually delays legal pathways to citizenship, and permanent residence. How do you cut the red tape? I think you get a lot more immigration courts and quicker processing through those courts. But you need many more judges and many more courts to handle the load. That's going to cost more. It's too bad if it costs more. It's needed to end the crisis. He says accountability for the U.S. role in exacerbating the migrant crisis. I'm not sure what exactly that means. I have a little more than a vague idea. I am for doing that, but it means general foreign policy of the United States towards Latin America has to be changed. I think that things that our businesses want to do, in Latin America, should have to go through impact studies on the indigenous populations there. And only then should we grant permission for our corporations to do this, okay, in other nations. In many of these other nations, okay, there are oligarchies that have actually been bought off by the corporations. So, left to themselves, the other nations are likely to approve projects that are harmful to their citizens. We have to be a second line of defense and make those impact assessments, okay, ourselves, under the full light, okay, of publicity, transparency as to what, okay, goes on there. The assessments need to be staffed by people who are looking for negative impacts on the citizens of foreign nations. That needs to be part of a good neighbor foreign policy of ourselves. I think that's important. Okay, abolish ICA. Okay, abolish ICE and demilitarize the southern border. Yes, we need to do that. But in order to do that, we have to change our role in Latin America, because as AMLO just said a few days ago, which we covered here, we have been driving on the migrant crisis by our foreign policies in Latin American countries, our pro-corporate foreign policies in Latin American countries. We need to enforce international and national laws that allow for asylum seekers to enter the country without delay, okay, or prejudice. Yes, we do need to enforce those laws. That means the asylum seekers have to be able to get through the courts. That means we need many more courts and a far bigger judicial structure to facilitate this. Global justice, dismantle the U.S. empire. Yes. Slash the bloated U.S. military budget. Yes. Disband NATO. Yes. Expeditious and responsible closure of global U.S. military bases, AFRICOM, etc. Global cooperation in lieu of full spectrum dominance. Yes. Cease all war funding and weapons to Ukraine and invest in peacemaking. Cease military funding to the State of Israel. End Israeli apartheid of Palestinian people. And press the UN to establish a program for Palestinian dignity and liberation. Yes. We have to go through the UN. We also have to stop supporting the Israeli regime that is practicing, okay, apartheid. Cease all military support to nations committing war crimes. Yes, I agree with that, as long as we have a way of objectively assessing which nations have been committing war crimes. With respect to the Ukraine war, there's been a lot of false information circulating with respect to Russian war crimes, circulating here, okay, in the Western press. There's a mountain, okay, of evidence, okay, that Ukrainians have been committing war crimes, especially the neo-Nazis, so prominent in the military, okay, of Ukraine. We need a good way to evaluate who is committing the war crimes and who is not, in order to make that, an operative thing. Truth and Reconciliation Commission for U.S. intervention in Central America, South America, Africa, and Asia. Sure. End the Cuban embargo and normalize relations by removing the nation from the SSOT list. Yes. That list is nonsense. We've done great damage to Cuba. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission for U.S. intervention would undoubtedly go through the damage we've created in foreign countries. No intervention, either military or otherwise, in Haiti. Cancel all IMF World Bank debts for so-called developing nations, especially nations on the African continent. I'm all for that. End the global patriarchy and associated violence that oppresses women around the world, and stand in solidarity with global women-led movements such as those in Afghanistan and Iran. Don't know what he means by stand, in solidarity. If he means that we should intervene in those places in a military way, I certainly don't agree with that. That's not consistent with the collaborative foreign policy, that he wants to follow. We can stand in solidarity by making public statements. We can do other things to try to bring about fair treatment of women in those countries. But we have to recognize that we are not, the policemen of the world, and that sometimes we won't be able to improve the situation for women or other groups, in other countries, because we have to respect the sovereignty and integrity of other nations. So, I love this platform. I wish that Bobby Kennedy had this platform. It's really great. I went through it and I kept saying yes, 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 yes. Except in a few cases. I'm very favorably disposed to this platform. And remember, we are viewing this all within the context of the Dump the Corruption movement being successful. So, there would be a Congress that would approve of many of these measures that he's advocating for here. So he would be able to get it through Congress if he approached that. Now the question remains, how can he, as an individual, how well will he be able to manage the federal bureaucracy to actually implement the laws that he wants to institute? We have to evaluate that. We have to evaluate whether he and his staff will know enough about the laws and will know enough about the performance of the federal bureaucrats to be able to make changes in that area. That is, extremely important. For example, much of what he's talking about here is going to require a regulatory clampdown on large and rich corporations here in the United States. If we are going to support him, we have to know what changes in the federal bureaucracy he is going to make, how he is going to make the bureaucracy consistent with the program that he is offering here. There was something done by the Green Party a few years ago that I found very attractive. Specifically, when Jill Stein was running for president in 2015, 2016, she put together a shadow cabinet. And that shadow cabinet advertised its qualifications and its experience in various fields. It became apparent to me when I examined who was in that shadow cabinet and what they wanted to do as cabinet members. It became apparent to me that her cabinet was infinitely superior to the cabinet that resulted from Donald Trump's election. I would like to see Cornel West, and for that matter, Bobby Kennedy too, to tell us what their shadow cabinet is, who would be serving, because it's an old adage in Washington, D.C., that personnel, is policy. How many laws were undermined by Trump's cabinet and their failure to enforce certain things, laws on the books in the United States? How many laws did they fail to implement, or did they try to undermine? That's how important the cabinet is. The cabinet, the secretaries, the heads of the bureaucracies, the federal governments, and the personnel inside of the bureaucracies could undermine largely the legislative initiatives, of an administration or the legislative initiatives of Congress. We need to know more about how Cornel West would manage the federal bureaucracy. The reason why we do is because his career has been as an activist, and as, an academic. I don't know what the evidence is that he would be able to manage, the federal government. Now, I would raise that question with respect to Biden and with respect to Trump as well, or any candidate for the presidency. We need to know more about their capabilities for management. We have to know more about the management team they're going to be selecting. We have to know more about the White House staff they're going to be hiring, because that White House staff is enormously important. The chief of staff is enormously important, because the chief of staff is the traffic cop that selects those issues that the president is going to devote his or her time to. We need to know more about that, folks. Cornel did a wonderful job with his platform here. And he can be an inspirational character in his speaking, as well. But the key to making the federal bureaucracy a success is how you would staff that. Who the leaders would be. When Franklin Roosevelt took over in 1933, one of the reasons why his administration was so successful was because he had wonderful people, the brain trusts of his time, who came into his administration to help him. He had wonderful people in his White House. He had wonderful people in his War Department. Our management of the Second World War was really a marvel in many ways. We first introduced key principles of the quality movement in our World War II effort because FDR and his people hired by the right people. We need to know more about the management capabilities of Cornel West because we don't see a record of those management capabilities in his experience. And his whole administration could come to naught if he doesn't have those management capabilities or people close to him do not have those management capabilities. So at this point, that's all I have to say with respect to Cornel West when we compare his platform to the criteria that I specified. We don't hear a lot from him. There are some things in his platform that support empowering democracy by driving big money out of politics, like taxing the wealthy people. Of course, it depends on how heavily he would tax the wealthier people. But he didn't seem to have a lot of bullet points that dealt with the mechanisms of dumping the corruption or restoring freedom of speech and press, and assembly. He didn't talk much. He talked about protecting whistleblowers and things like that, but he didn't talk about the big censorship problem that we have now. He didn't talk much about the regulatory end of implementing the laws in the federal government, which is absolutely essential. And we need to know about that. He wants a collaborative foreign policy, but we did not hear him talk. Well, I guess there are elements in his platform that would end the war in Ukraine quickly. So, in terms of avoiding the risk, of nuclear war, I think that he does well, but I would like to see him be more specific about how he would be negotiating with the Russians and with the nations of Europe to develop a new European security framework that would basically defuse the risk of nuclear war in Europe. That's what I think is missing from his talking about these kinds of issues. Now, of course, in the area of avoiding the existential threat of a Trump versus Biden choice, he's doing the best he can by running for president. So that's very good. I don't see much mention of the importance of ending the extremist Supreme Court and doing specific things about it in his platform. I think he's pretty good on ending the climate emergency, fixing the American healthcare system. He's pretty good on fixing the electoral system, so every adult has an unconstrained but right to vote. But I think that he's only pretty good there. In other words, he wants to reinstate those areas of the Voting Rights Act that were declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. But that is not enough. More has to be done. I did not see that explicitly stated in his platform. Okay, I would like to see it. Of course, he's very strong on gender equality and reproductive choice, as we talked about. I don't see any mention of the economic paradigm for fiscal and monetary policy. He seems inclined very favorably to a job guarantee, a federal job guarantee at a living wage, a socially inclusive wage. So that's the influence of Derek Hamilton and the indirect influence, of MMT as well. But we really need to know whether he fully embraces the economics of MMT as the paradigm by which the federal government should be run. I think he's very good in the area of foreign policy, advocating for one that would basically, he doesn't say he's going to recognize, the legitimacy of a multipolar world, but he's all about collaborating with others to bring economic and social justice to everyone. So I think he scores very high on that particular criterion, as he does on ending domestic poverty by constructing a socially inclusive, socioeconomic safety net. He's great at that. Of course, it seems like he's very favorable to a basic income, free education at every level of schooling, and elimination of student debt. I don't know about justice for non-state ethnic groups wanting self-determination. He's very good on the Palestinian issue. Don't know how he feels about the Kurds. He's good on justice for indigenous people and for LGBTQIA plus groups seeking equality. So in general, scores very well on the criteria that I specified here. I should have added the criteria of what the likelihood is that he would be good at managing the federal government. I think that is really extremely important, and that we haven't really had good managers of the federal government for quite a long time, and we need that very, very badly. And the Johnson administration continued. Those were good cabinets for the most part. Okay. For that matter, even in Jimmy Carter's administration, it was a very good cabinet filled with very high quality people in the context of the times. In recent administrations, I don't think the cabinets have been. They were good. Well, it's 10:46. I don't think that I have time. I don't even know how many people are still here. There are a few people. Okay, so I assume. April Mano says, I want you and D in my cabinet. Okay, I think I'm going to postpone the evaluation, of Robert Kennedy and the comparison of the two for next week. That will be on Wednesday night, of next week. I didn't want to split this over 2 sessions, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to because it's getting late. Uh, so I think the evaluation of Robert Kennedy of RFKJ will have to wait until next Wednesday, which I guess is fortuitous because his big announcement is going to occur on Monday. So maybe we'll have some more information then as to how he's approaching things.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I can see that one key criteria for comparison, okay, is going to be how we evaluate his capability for managing, okay, the federal government. Have to ask that question because he hasn't had the kind of job that involves the management, okay, of people, and we just don't know how good he would be at that. He's been a philosopher. He's been an academic. He's been, okay, an activist, and he's been enormously successful in all of these roles. But the president of the United States has to be a very good manager himself or have very good managers that he has hired to implement the program that he advocates for. And so we have to be very serious about comparing that, even though I did not originally state that explicitly as an important criterion. I think it is, though, a very, very important, okay, criterion. So I'm going to call a halt to this now for tonight, and I'm going to continue it on Wednesday of next week, which is our next Dump the Corruption um, um, show.
I want to say that April brings up a good point. Well, being an activist takes managing, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Being an activist, and especially, we look at how he managed things with Bernie Sanders. And it does, he gets large crowds and
Bernie Sanders was a good manager in his campaign, okay, until he pulled the rug out from under it.
yeah. Right,
He
I was
certainly,
going to say Cornel West was there, and
yeah,
he was
I,
managing a large group and bringing together a large group for Bernie.
he was bringing together, okay, a large group, okay, for Bernie, but I don't know much about what that kind of management involved. And of course, he was not the overall manager of the campaign.
Right.
So uh, he was involved in the management of that campaign to some degree. He was also involved to some degree in the management of the 2020 campaign, okay,
Mm-hmm.
as well. So uh, there is some experience there. But when we look at uh, um, for Obama, his particular campaign managers, uh, they were not so good in the federal bureaucracy in that kind, okay, of context. They were good at managing campaigns, but this did not extend to management, okay, of the bureaucracy. Obama brought in other people, okay, to manage that.
Right. And the sad thing is that it seems the presidency has turned into, for example, look at Biden, and you look at Trump, you look at the fact that, yeah, you have a president there, but it seems they're just like a token, and
Mm-mm.
everybody else is running the show.
Yes, the president, the elected person, gets to be the figurehead, and foreign policy is really being carried out by Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, who's part of the White House staff. Okay, and also, of course, Victoria Nuland,
Mm.
who is notorious for her activities
She's a horror
inside,
show.
yeah, of Ukraine. If we knew at the start of 2020 that his selections to run foreign policy were going to be Victoria Nuland and Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, he probably never would have gotten elected. So these are important things for us to know. We don't
Well, for some
know.
people, I don't think a lot of people really pay attention to that. I mean, I
I
didn't
know
vote
they
for
don't
him
pay
anyway.
attention to that, but we have to pay attention to it for the evaluation that we make for ourselves.
Right.
Okay, in other words, if someone is likely to manage the federal government in a completely incompetent way and to be just a figurehead, as these presidents have been, uh, okay, then we have to know about that. For example, the selections of Donald Trump to manage some of the federal agencies were very damaging to those agencies.
Your
His,
education was terrible, who we put in there with education.
yes, terrible. His selection for Attorney General was terrible. His selection for Secretary of State, terrible. His foreign policy was terrible because of who he selected. Didn't stop him from doing things that would enrich himself and his family,
Mhm.
which is what he really cared about. But it was terrible for the public interest.
It seems that the RNC and the DNC have a lot of power in that area
Yeah, it
of
seems
putting
like
who
they
they
have
want in.
they have a lot of power in that area, right? They have influence over who the president is going to nominate for these areas. But in our evaluation, we've already eliminated Biden and Trump from consideration,
Exactly.
and Marianne Williamson for the time being, because she still
Mhm.
insists on running, in the Democratic primary. So we're down to Bobby, okay, and to Cornell.
Mhm.
And so we have to do the evaluation based on those two. Cornell looks great, okay, from a policy point of view, though when we look at what Bobby does, is has said he's going to do, okay, in that area, I think we are likely to find some areas where he may be offering things Cornell is not offering, and that are very important areas. But we may also find, I know we'll find, some areas in which he falls way short of what Cornell is suggesting. But the specifics of that will have to wait until Wednesday. So let's go through comments. April Romano says, "Wow, West, that sounds phenomenal. This platform is phenomenal. There's no question." Hell, Cornelia already on top, just on his stance, Medicare for all, okay, over Kennedy. Well, that's true. Kennedy's stance, okay, for Medicare for all is much better. But I can tell you this: I've gone through Bobby's a particular platform, even though he's not for Medicare for all. he has some good things to say in the area of healthcare reform. I think the problem with his stance on healthcare reform is that first we need to do Medicare for all, and then we need to do what he suggests. It's, sort of like that. But uh, anyway, okay, April makes a number of comments. Make teaching computerized. Oh, I don't know. I think you need the human element in teaching very much. I think that was one of the lessons we learned, okay, from the pandemics. People got through the pandemics, uh, but their Zoom classes, okay, were not as effective as the interpersonal environment of schools. That became quite clear, okay, after a while. Okay, because schools are not just teaching abstract subjects. They're teaching a lot about the interrelations among people. They contribute, the interpersonal aspects of schools contribute very much to socialization of people and help them to grow up in various ways. And I don't think we have a way to substitute for that just using the computer. April says, I want you and Dee in my cabinet. April says, cool. I never knew what the White House does for the president. April says, I'm learning about things I always forget to ask. And she says, I'm always late, but I'm still present. I know you have to take care of the kids, April. Well, being an activist takes managing, okay, doesn't it? It depends on what you do, okay, in your activism. It depends, okay, on what you do. I mean, activists have a number of roles to play in their management, okay, of activism. For example, a very good manager of activism, okay, is Medea Benjamin, or Code Pink, in my view. I mean, she, appears to be omnipresent in terms of her issues, okay, always. But I don't know that she has the kind of skills that would make her, for example, a good Secretary of Health, okay, and Human Services. So those are the kinds of questions, okay, that we have to ask. Kay Ryan says we should have had Bernie. Yeah, we should have had Bernie. Kay says, okay, guys, I'm out of here for tonight. Okay, I love you all. We love you too, Kay. So I think, Dee, it's just you and me and April.
Okay.
Okay, so I think it's time to say goodnight.
I think so too. I think you had a very good show tonight.
Yeah, I liked it too. I thought it was okay. It's what I like to do. It was very reasoned. That's
Yes.
what I like to do the most.
It lets people know more who Cornel West is, really dive deep into his platform. So that was good.
Yes, I thought so too. I thought that was a good thing to do for him in showing him off. It was the best way, really, to show him off. It was so complete in terms of what he wants to do. If he had his druthers, if he got the Congress that we need to get for whatever president comes into office.
Right, because we see right now between the administrations, whether it's a Democrat as president or a Republican as president, what do they really do?
Yeah. So April says I'll be checking back next week. Super good show. Thanks, Dee, for your comments as well. Thanks,
Thank
Dee,
you.
for your comments as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's call it a night.
Yes. Good night,
And
Bonnie.
I'll probably see you sometime over the weekend. I
Yes,
really,
Sunday night is when I'm going to have a show.
okay, I'll try to be ready for it. I have a problem this weekend. I
Okay, well,
have,
Sunday and Monday I'm going to be doing the show.
well, I'm certainly going to have a problem on one of these days. I might have a problem on both. I
Okay.
have my personal income taxes to complete.
Okay.
Okay, and so, okay, I think I can do that on Saturday and Sunday and get through it. But if I can't, uh,
Okay.
I'm just going to have to skip one of the shows because I have to complete it, and get it off my back. It's approaching the 15th of the month, and
Okay.
that's when, okay, it's due, and I need to get it in a few days early because I hate like hell to go over the post office on the last day.
Right.
Okay, so thank you, Dee.
Okay, thank you for having me, and try to have a nice weekend, even though you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I'll try to have a nice weekend. I'm sure we'll have our nice times this weekend.
Yes. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and share for
And
those
buy
that
us,
watch the show later.
and like the show, of course.
Yes, and buy us a coffee
Yeah.
and Joe's Patreon account.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.